Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the second album from Pendulum, In Silico. So, I think it's pretty universally agreed on that Pendulum's first album, Hold Your Color, is pretty awesome. It was going to be a tough act to follow, to say the very least. And when this follow-up came out, a lot of people didn't know what to think. The opening few seconds of this album let everyone know exactly what they were getting into. Rob Swire screaming over a metal song. Pendulum were going full-out Prodigy on their second album. The iTunes review said that it was an album that could convert the staunchest rocker to electronic music and vice versa. Yeah, that didn't happen. Unlike the Prodigy, who found themselves getting a ton of commercial success and praise heaped onto them for fusing metal into their brand of electronic music on the fat of the land, the general consensus on In Silico seems to be, it's alright. You'll always see people praising the crap out of Hold Your Color and Immersion. This one, not so much. Generally considered to be the weakest of the three Pendulum albums. But of course, we're not here to talk about the opinions of the mass majority of Pendulum fans, we're here to talk about the opinion of just this one Pendulum fan here. What do I think of it? Okay, yeah, it is definitely the weakest of the three Pendulum albums. Well, first of all, metal has just never really been my genre, and second of all, this is also the shortest of Pendulum's three albums. Like, Hold Your Color had 14 songs, Immersion had 15 songs, In Silico had 10. Granted, shorter experience means less room for error, so those 10 songs better be pretty great, right? Well, no, not really. At least, not nearly to the same extent as Hold Your Color, which I basically really loved every track on. I did not love every track on In Silico, but I'm gonna give it credit for this. Like, when I first heard this album, I didn't feel the need to listen to it all the way through anymore, because I thought it was kind of samey and only a couple songs really delivered for me, so I just kept returning to those couple of songs that delivered, but of course just returning to some of the songs isn't gonna cut it for a full-on review, so I just kept listening to the deep cuts that I previously didn't like, and found that this album was actually a pretty big grower. Mind you, it's still nowhere near as consistent as Hold Your Color. There's no bad songs, but there are some that are like absolutely freaking amazing, and some that are, they're alright. I may as well get the, like, absolutely freaking amazing ones out of the way. I think there are two of those on this album. First one is Propane Nightmares. I'm sure no one's really surprised by that, except maybe the people in the UK who apparently had this overplayed on the radio in some places. I wish we could get Pendulum on the radio over here. But yeah, Propane Nightmares absolutely kills. Rob Swire singing is on point as always, although you can apply that to pretty much every song on this album. He sings on basically every single song on here. But this track in particular also has these great horn sections and surf guitars, and it's like the theme song to some action movie that's also soundtracking the chase scene. Oh yeah, and the song is also extremely catchy. I internally sing along with Rob Swire's hook all the time. Bring it on home. I don't usually like turning up the volume on loud songs as I like to protect my hearing, but the volume just goes up on this one every single time. Love Propane Nightmares so much. And pretty much everything I said also applies to the track 9,000 Miles, which I think I like even more than Propane Nightmares. Think Girl on Fire from the debut, but on steroids. It starts out kinda subtle with some drumming and little synth bass line, and two lines from Swire, but all of it is a build-up for that guitarist whose name I still can't pronounce. I'm told he's called Perry? I don't know how to say his last name, but whatever. But he is awesome. He just kills it with those acoustic guitar riffs. And the song just keeps building up in intensity until it hits basically the same level as Propane Nightmares, but much happier, more exhilarating. It's a song that just makes me so dang happy to be alive. I half wish that the album ended here, but yeah, if only the rest of the album were as ridiculously good as those two songs. Unfortunately, yeah, Propane Nightmares and 9,000 Miles are by far the standouts, and for the longest time, They were like the only songs I ever listened to on this album, even though I did listen the shit out of them. But to be fair, I think basically every single one of these songs has gotten better. Granite was pretty awesome with a typically great hook. No wonder it was a single. It's got this really neat alien feel to it, aided by the presence of theremins. Personally, I always considered it the inferior cousin to Propane Nightmares, but it always got a listen or two every now and then. It's definitely a standout for me. But I think the one that's grown on me the most overall this time is probably Visions. While it has undoubtedly benefited from having come right after Propane Nightmares and my not necessarily skipping right to 9,000 miles every time, this is a legitimately great song that I initially didn't give it credit for. Rob Swires covered his voice in vocoders this time around, and this track ends up being a bit more laid back than the other ones on here, just centered around his vocoder singing and some nice chill guitar riffs. Even the usual backbeat is a tad slower. Like after the soaring high of Propane Nightmares, Visions provides a much needed break in this album, although not to the extent of not being able to keep up the momentum that the album had previously had going. The same goes with the next track, Midnight Runner, which admittedly blended in the background most of the time as there's not a particularly strong hook. But when I actually listen and pay attention to what's going on, it's actually really interesting. Like at the beginning it's got this like vague Arabian Nights kind of thing going for it with some cool pianos backing things up. And once the intro is done, it continues to run through a bunch of different spooky melodies that are all pretty nice, and it's a wonderfully creepy and haunting track that doesn't feel the need to go too far over the top. Pretty big grower here, too. The closer on here, The Tempest, is also kind of the same mold. Had to really sit up and listen and soak in everything to fully appreciate it. Even though, like, a big chunk of it is just a straight metal song that's half the tempo of the rest of everything. But I mean, like, it also has this intro with all this exotic percussion and orchestral sounds, and it is like this fantastic build-up. And then near the end, like, there's this little synth interlude and these huge anthemic chords, and then at the very end, like the last minute, it actually moves at high speed like all the other songs on here. And then it ends in 20 seconds of guitar feedback. Gotta say, it's certainly a cathartic closer, even if not particularly catchy one. I approve of this as the closer. Now, of course, there are some tracks on here that I'm not as big on. Showdown, I think I've actually finally warmed up to that one, but it did take a while. It just really slams you in the face and pulls no punches, telling you this is exactly what you're getting into. If you've got a problem with our new direction, you can go fuck yourself. But after enough repeat listens, it's actually pretty catchy. I think I like it now. And once it like actually kind of turns more electronic later on, then it starts to really get going for me. And The Other Side, that one's pretty catchy too. Has a neat intro, but as far as singles go, it's easily the weakest one. The weird ship is coming down voices kind of take away from it for me a little bit. Not bad though. I don't skip this one anymore. Unfortunately, that also leaves Different, which is totally forgettable for me outside the line Sinking in the Sand. And Mutiny, little tedious, personally. I mean, I really like how the lyrics are exactly the same as The Terminal from Hold Your Color, and I also like how it kind of has a bouncier beat than the other tracks on here, but not really as fun to listen to as some of the other ones on here. So overall, yeah, this is probably the worst of Pendulum's 3 albums, but I mean, it does have a more thoughtful side to it that I never really gave it credit for, that shows up on songs like Visions and Midnight Runner and even The Tempest in some regards. And it's got Propane Nightmares and 9,000 Miles on it, so there is that too. I think people who might have written this one off previously out to give it another shot. Right, granted, even though it is a lot better than when I first heard it, I still can't honestly call it great. Most of these songs, when I'm speaking about, I will nod and say, yeah, that's a good song, but only 2 am I, like, really super into. Regardless, even though it is probably the weakest of the 3 Pendulum albums, it's still a Pendulum album. Fires on all cylinders, it's still an absolutely fun time. Still got the CD. It's not great, but it's still definitely worth your time. I'm glad I sat down to really fully digest what was going on. I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it. But I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.